Vikarajacharya Shrota Shrota Srīmad. His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki. Srīmad Bhāgavatam ki. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. All right, so reading from Canto 3, Chapter 10, text 15, and title is Divisions of Creation. So word for word. Okay. Ajaha tu mahantaha sargaha guna vaishamyam atmanaha dvitiyaha tu ahamaha yatra dravya jnana kriya udayaha Ajyastu mahanta sargo gunavaishamyam atmanaha dvitiyas ahamo yatra dravyagyana kriyodayaha Ajyastu mahanta sargo gunavaishamyam atmanaha titviyastva ahamo yatra dravyagyana kriyodayaha Ajyastu mahanta sargo gunavaishamyam atmanaha titviyastva yatra dravyagyana kriyodayaha Ajyastu mahata sargo gunavaishamyam atmanaha tutviyaствahamo yatra dravyagyana kriyodayaha Manajis? Stu mahata sargo gunavaishamyam atmanaha tutviya swahamo yatra Dravyajnana Karyodaya Mahata Sargo Gunavaishyam Atmanaha Titviya Sahabo Yatra Dravyajnana Karyodaya. Okay, word for word. Ajaha, the first. Tu, but. Mahataha, of the total emanation from the Lord. Sargaha, creation. Gunavaishyam, interaction of the material modes. Atmanaha, of the supreme. Dvitiyaha, the second. Tu, but. Ahamaha, false ego. Yatra, wherein. Dravya, material ingredients. Dhyana, material knowledge. Kriya udayaha, awakening of activities. Work. All right, translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. Okay. Of the 9 creations, the first one is the creation of the Mahat Tattva, or the sum total of the material ingredients, wherein the modes interact due to the presence of the Supreme Lord. And the second, the false ego, is generated, in which the material ingredients, material knowledge, and material activities arise. Report. The first emanation from the Supreme Lord for material creation is called Mahat Tattva. The interaction of the material modes is the cause of false identification, or the sense that a living being is made of material elements. This false ego is the cause of identifying the body and mind with the soul proper. Material resources and the capacity and knowledge to work are all generated in the second term of creation after the Mahatattva. Jnana indicates the senses, which are sources of knowledge and their controlling deities. Work entails the working organs and their controlling deities. All these are generated in the second creation. Om Jnanatam Anandasya Gananjanjana Shalakaya Chakshura Ulamanatam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shikta Padakamanam Shri Guru Vaishnamam Shri Rupam Saguratam Sahagana Raganavtam Etam Tam Shajivam Savadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saritam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishnapadan Sahagana Naritam Shri Vishakamitam Scha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vikas Swamani Namane Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamani Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nivishesha Shunivani Pashyata Tarne Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Shri Chaitanya Prabhu Vande Yat Prasada Shaya Viyataha Sangarat Yat Karavatar Edha Siddhanta Sanmanim Adyastu Mahanta Sargo Guna Vaishamyam Atmanaha Dvitiyas Tvahamo Yatra Dravyajnana Kriyodayaha. Of the 9 creations, the first one is the creation of the Mahat Tattva, or the sum total of the material ingredients, wherein the modes interact due to the presence of the Supreme Lord. And the second, the false ego, is generated, in which the material ingredients, material knowledge, and material activities arise. So this, so the previous verse that Vishwachitta Prabhu spoke on Monday, I believe. So this verse is, so the previous verse was segueing into the different types of creation, and that verse was speaking about annihilation. So kind of intrinsic to creation, especially in the material world, annihilation is also kind of like, goes with it. Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita that material things have a beginning, middle, and end. So the material world has a beginning, middle, and end because it's material. So it's so the science of creation. So this verse in particular today is discussing 2 of those 9 aspects, specifically the creation of the Mahatattva and the false ego. And generally, these parts of the Bhāgavatam can be a little bit confusing. Just like previously we were talking about time, Mukundata Prabhu was speaking about time, and time will be spoken about in the next chapter. The next chapter is called Calculations of Time from the Atom, which just that sentence in and of itself is, confusing. Because like Mukundata Prabhu was making the point that or one of those, the purporters was making the point that I can't even remember exactly what it was said, but the kind of the point was being made that time is calculated as a moment, but it's not actually what time, we're measuring time, but that's not exactly what time is. And you can get in a whole discussion about that, but I'm not going to get in a discussion about time today. But it's just how do you measure time from an atom, from an an object like that. Generally they would have sundials, but that would kind of trace the movement of time. But anyways, we'll get into that. I remember when one of the first times I went to the temple, when I moved in, I went to Alatra, and then I found this 3rd canto, and maybe I was in the temple for a couple weeks, and then I read this whole chapter about time, because I was really interested in time and all that kind of stuff, before Krishna consciousness. So that kind of bled over my previous conditioning. So anyways, I remember reading this whole chapter, and I didn't pick up much on anything. I was just kind of fascinated by the topic. So it is very confusing. And then I also remember reading this for the first time, this 3rd canto, and the beginning, being able to follow it, but once it kind of got to this part specifically, not really being able to pick up on much of anything. And still now, it's difficult to understand because it's a complicated subject matter. It's dealing with universal architect, which is we don't deal with that. There's people that go to college and they learn how to build, whatever, skyscrapers and such. Now that's pretty much what it is. It's skyscrapers, and then your whatever, your current what'd you call it exactly? But your current dwelling unit, which you see, it's all these houses, they look the same. Previously, they could see across the street, that house there in particular is built out of bricks, but usually they don't build so many houses out of bricks this day. They have a system. They came up with a system, and you can see that too with usually maybe more rich neighborhoods. They have this system, and where I grew up across the street, they also do. So they have whatever, a certain company comes in and they whatever, lay the foundation and everything, and then they build the exteriors, and another company comes in. But anyways, the point is that it's industrialized construction, and it's just dirt cheap. And you just teach people whatever, the basic stuffs, and then when they're done, all the houses look pretty much the same because there's no artistic sense to it. Previously, people when they would create things, it'd be a whole they would create it, and then they throw their artistic twist to it, and then you would know this artist or whatever. If you look at pictures of Picasso or most famously Salvador Dali, whose paintings look like someone was doing acid or something. It's it's they have their distinguished touch, and that's kind of a new thing also. I mean, artists, they would make things and it'd be durable, nice and stuff, but kind of a little bit too much. It's people want to throw their flavor on it. And then you see too what is it? Andy Warhol, I think he came up with that famous thing. I forget exactly, but it's 1 color, 2 color, 3 color, 4 colors or something. And that's pop art. And then his famous picture of the Campbell soup. I don't really know why that was so famous, but that was top of modern art back in the day. And then also, anyways, there's so much to say about that, but it's nonsense. So the creation, universal creation, is complex. And so the first part of it, sarga, is what's being spoken of here. It's specifically done on the Vishnu platform by by Vishnu himself, and he has the brain, the capacity, the energies, and everything to do that. Whereas Brahma and other living entities, they don't have that capacity, because this creation happens before the living entities are existing. This creation of the Mahatattva, because Vishnu creates the material world, but here, even before we're even talking about creation, we're talking about the ingredients of creation. So being mentioned in this verse is one of them is the Mahatattva. And so Prabhupada opens up his purport by explaining the first emanation from the Supreme Lord for material creation is the Mahatattva. And so Prabhupada explains this in different ways in different places. Generally, see if I wrote here exactly. Generally, he translates that. I think he made the point here, but he explains that that's like the total material energy. And so, and that's, anyways, we can like try to understand that. He also says in different places that this is the original total energy for creation. And so I guess like a simple way of understanding that is that everything needed for creation, the Mahatattva contains. It's like, I don't really know what exactly it is. I haven't seen it. But Vishnu is able to deal with that. I've also probably explained like the Mahatattva, it's like a cloud also. And then I believe it's also one of the coverings of the material universe of each Brahmanda. So the Mahatattva is the total material energy. So from what I've like read and understood, so you have the pradhana, which is like the unmanifested material energy, and like that's kind of like laying there in like a dormant state, kind of like sleeping or something. And then Vishnu like glances at that, and then that glance becomes like Shambhu, or like a form of Shiva, and then that's like interacts. So Shiva like interacts with that, with like Parvati, and then that becomes alive or something like that. Anyways, it's bad language, and then my understanding is that becomes the Mahatattva. And so that Mahatattva, from what I've understood, is everything in there is needed to create. It's like I don't really know exactly what exactly it is. I was thinking, said it's something like the other day, like I went into Sprouts and just bought some apples and bananas. So like by the bananas, they had like a box of like banana bread, and it's like everything you need, just like whatever. It's got like the flour in there, it's got the sugar in there, it's probably got cinnamon, maybe nuts, maybe baking soda, whatever you need to like make that banana bread is in that box. All you got to do is, I don't know, maybe put some water or something. maybe it's even got dehydrated bananas in there in powdered form or something. So everything there is needed to make the bananas or banana bread. So anyways, it's probably simplistic understanding, but the Mahatattva is probably something like that everything that's needed for the material world is there, and Vishnu is able to, extract or utilize that somehow or other, and then empower Brahma to kind of utilize that energy or that element or whatever you want to call it, and supply everything needed for the material world. So I'll read one thing here from it just talks a little bit about the Mahatattva. So this is, I probably won't read the whole thing, but this is from the first canto, I think 13th chapter, text 55. So Prabhupada just talks a little bit about the Mahatattva. So just to kind of add some depth to this, so the Mahatattva, Prabhupada speaks about it like in different ways, different times. So, like I said, sometimes he speaks about it as far as like the total material energy goes. It's like kind of the cause of creation. Other times he speaks about it in the sense of like what is it? Like it's conditioning, or like yogis like getting free from that and such. So this one he's talking about yogis getting free from that. So the living being, by his desiring to lord it over the material world and declining to cooperate with the Supreme Lord, contacts the sum total of the material world, namely the Mahatattva. And from the Mahatattva, his false identity with the material world is developed, along with his material intelligence, mind, and senses. So just kind of unpack that a little bit. So in this particular sentence, Prabhupada's making the point, so the living entity comes to the material world, he encounters the Mahatattva. And so the Mahatattva too, it supplies the ingredients, but then also with that, there's a subtle contamination that comes with that, a type of conditioning. And so that's also interesting, that it's either, like, I was thinking about that, maybe talk about that more later, maybe it's in my notes somewhere. But that some of these things that Vishnu is able to create, they literally come with like psychological conditionings that like they're created, and they affect how you think and how you interact like in the material world. It's really like far out. It's like crazy, like architect. Like, like people don't even, like they kind of can do some stuff like that, like in, this world now, but not to the degree that like Vishnu is able to do that. To create something that's like so subtle, but it affects like the way you think in your mind and stuff. And they have stuff like brainwashing techniques and whatever, psychological manipulation and things, but not to this degree. Actually, it's really like, whew. Material world is a wild place. So continuing, so all these cover his pure spiritual identity. So by the yogic process. I lost my spot. Okay. By the yogic process, when his pure identity is realized in self-realization, one has to revert to the original position by amalgamating the 5 gross elements and the subtle elements, mind and intelligence, into that Mahatattva. Thus, getting freed from the clutches of the Mahatattva, he has to merge into the existence of the Supersoul. So he's talking about the yogi, but it's making that point that the living entity has acquired all these different things coming in contact to the material world, and the yogi has to now like give them up, all these like, the gross and subtle. And there's different descriptions given that in the Bhāgavatam, that the yogi like, puts the senses into the total, amalgamates like the sense perception into that. And so it's like the backward process. Here we're talking about the forward process, like creation. And that's like winding up for like the yogi. So, thus getting freed from the clutches of the Mahatattva. Okay, we read that. In other words, he has to realize that qualitatively he is non-different from the Supersoul, and thus he transcends the material sky by his intelligence amalgamated with his pure identity, and becomes engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. So anyway, just to clarify what like Prabhupada's saying there, it's qualitatively, that's the main thing. He's not different from the Supersoul. It's not that the yogi realizes that he is a Supersoul. He realizes that he's spirit. He is the same quality, not same quantity. So, and we do the same thing in Krishna consciousness. It's the same. It's just a different like way of going about it. And then and then Prabhupada says here, the highest perfectional development of. Not that sentence. So he says here, so he transcends the material sky with his pure identity and becomes engaged in transcendental loving service of the Lord. So the perfection of yoga is that one becomes Krishna conscious and engaged in devotional service of the Lord. And so Prabhupada would make that point again and again, actually. And that's like one of the many reasons why Prabhupada was against like this, just teaching yoga and doing all the stretches and stuff like that. There's a letter in which Prabhupada explains that like, okay, you're going to go to the society and do that, but you should like, I think he says like that, but you should distribute my book, like Perfection of Yoga, but you should like make it really clear that like the perfection of yoga is like to become a devotee. So you're going to do yoga classes, then there should be like some discussion in that class about how like this isn't topmost, and actually the perfection of it is to become Krishna conscious and to, go out and distribute books or go out on Harinam or something like that, to, get connected and not just, stretch your body for sense gratification. So anyways, Prabhupada wanted that to be understood, and we can see here in the Bhāgavatam that it's explaining that. So let's see here. I think that's it. The last paragraph, I'll just kind of paraphrase, but it talks about how pure devotees, that they're in the material world, but they're not in contact with any of the material elements. And they may seemingly have a material body, but it doesn't exist. It's not material. It's completely spiritual, because they're, as Prabhupada says here, the spiritual current of the Lord's identical interest. So the pure devotees, they're completely aligned with the desires of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so they're completely free from all the contaminations of the Mahatattva. So they're in this world, but not of this world, as sometimes is said. So that kind of gives a little bit of different light of the Mahatattva. So we can see here from that description is that the Mahatattva for the material encased living beings, that is infectious. It's with it comes all these different things, and it's amazing because all these different contaminations come from that, and also being in the material world. I don't know if we've discussed that yet. I forget exactly where. I think it's coming up in 2 or 3 chapters, but the chapter will open up describing all the different kleshas, or the what is this? Like the different miseries that Brahma creates in order to perpetuate the illusions of the living entity. Yeah, it's right here. And so Brahma creates, this will get in chapter 12 when we start talking about Visharga. So Brahma first created the nested engagements like self-deception, the sense of death, anger after frustration, the sense of false ownership, and the illusory bodily conception, or forgetfulness of one's real identity. So it's amazing, all these different things are there, but nobody's aware of them, that these things are opposed upon me, that because I'm in the material world, I have, self-deception or sense of death, think death is going to happen or I'm going to die or that there is death. But it's that spiritual identity is completely covered over to the point that people don't even believe in the soul or that believe that they're spiritual or whatever. Or they think that they're spiritual, but then they identify with their mind or their intelligence, that this is the perfection of spiritual life. And there's so many different misconceptions that come along with that. And so coming in the material world and engaging in different life forms and stuff, so our soul gets covered over, and then within that covering is uploaded all these different things to help us have a experience separate from Krishna, in which is Prabhupada would amazingly explain that living entity comes to the material world to be God, to enjoy as Krishna, enjoy separate from Krishna. And so to facilitate all that experience, all these different things are needed there. But simultaneously, the material world is a prison house, but a correctional facility for living entities to rectify their improper behavior and attitude. So that's Krishna's mercy also. It's both Krishna's mercy to give facility to enjoy, but then also to correct it. Because, anyways, we understand that Krishna wants living entities to be rectified and come back and not, hang out in a place that is dukhalayam ashashvatam, temporary and miserable. So that's a little bit about Mahatattva. So we can discuss some about this false ego. And so false ego is a big subject, and Prabhupada makes a lot of points in this purport, actually, that I won't be able to cover. But so Prabhupada says here, so this false ego is the cause of identifying the body and mind with the soul proper. So specifically the false ego that makes the living entity think that, I am this body. And then with that comes so many different things. Okay. So, and then there's I am this body, and then this person is my mother, and this person is my father, and what else? And this is my nation, and so many things come with that. And then we're better than you because we're born here, or no, we're better than you because we're born here, or whatever. So many different things go on the platform of bodily conception of life. And so to get free of that false ego is the many different spiritual practices try understand the false ego and try to get rid of that. We'll talk about that a little bit some later. So, and there's so much that can be said about the false ego. Literally, Prabhupada talks about that so much in his books, and it's a big subject matter as far as it goes in the Vedas and such like that, and kind of getting free from ahankar. And Krishna also speaks about that in Bhagavad Gita. So the false ego causing the identification with the body and the mind. And some people understand that. That's kind of egoism is a bad thing and such like that. And so we're saying in some spiritual circles, they understand that ego is bad. So therefore, you have to get rid of ego or dissolve ego or things like that. And, destroy. And then get rid of your identity. So of course that's going too far. We don't say that in Krishna consciousness, that you dissolve ego and you don't exist anymore. But we say purify the ego. And so like that. And some devotees, they would also mention, or say like, what Srila Prabhupada, for instance, I think Sikhi Mahiti Prabhu makes this point, actually, is that like when they would see Srila Prabhupada, or when the first time Sikhi Mahiti Prabhu saw Srila Prabhupada, he was like seeing somebody that didn't have like any ego. So someone that had, pure ego, a pure sense of identity based on the spiritual platform. So that's what it means to be established in real ego. So Sikhi Mahiti Prabhu describes like seeing Srila Prabhupada, and so many devotees have described like seeing Srila Prabhupada and seeing him interact with other people, that there wasn't any sense of like, with Prabhupada, of just like bodily identification, or like trying to like show himself as like very amazing or very intelligent, or like trying to show off or anything like that, or like any sense of like, I don't want to say egoism for that word, but any sense of just like, I'm trying to think of another way to describe this. Creating an image, yeah. But just like, I guess just like showing himself off as like great on the material platform. Srila Prabhupada, he mentions he did have like spiritual pride and like for his like spiritual master and stuff like that. But it wasn't, anyways, the point is, it wasn't mundane like that. It wasn't like, annoying to be around, so to say. But some people, they were annoyed being around Prabhupada, like some, materialist people. They were frustrated with him and such. But anyways, the devotees had mentioned that Prabhupada, that they would be around him, or whatever he would do, or they were just like amazing to see, and no touch of like that. So anyways, so within like mainstream society, people, they do talk about ego. And then there's different like things that are mentioned with that, like whatever, that person is like egoistic, or, I've heard like someone's like ego tripping, some situation, and someone is like making a big drama or something like that, or making a big fuss, or whatever, like, making a point that like, I'm the boss around here, like you do what I say, and like really like emphasizing that point for like no reason. Sometimes that may need to be emphasized. Maybe someone's out of line and it's like, okay, like I'm the boss around here, and like one more thing out of you, and like you're out of here. So that may need to be like emphasized if we're like acting out of line, but like sometimes it could be like a little bit too emphasized. Like that. So then, people, whatever, that person's like ego tripping or whatever. And then what else is here? Oh, massaging someone's ego. That's also something. Forget about that. But then someone could just be so full of themselves, and it's like the only way to deal with that person is like, anytime you meet them, like, oh, Mr. Such and Such, you're so great, you're so amazing. And then it's like, then it's a little bit more easier to deal with the person. The phone is confirming. This table is a little funny, but anyways, get on an ego trip about this table, it's not perfect, then what is that? Anyways, I won't get into specific examples, but like that, someone can go on an ego trip or massage someone's ego. And Prabhupada would mention that. There's that verse given by Prabodhananda Saraswati that you meet somebody, and that's needed for book distribution sometimes. Is that, whatever, such and such person, you're so great, you're so amazing, you have so much money in the bank, the way, one of the things you used to say, you probably still say that, when you walk, people follow. Oh, this table. So that's like an amazing line. And then when you speak, people listen. Yeah, you look like a leader, not a follower. So it's like massaging someone's ego, and then people hear that, and they think like, oh, yeah. Like, you've understood. And then literally, like, it's not like when they walk, nobody follows because no one cares to be around them. When they speak, people are thinking, like, I've heard that, they're just waiting for them to shut up or something. So it's like, so that just inflated sense. So then, but the person that's like, anyways, devotees are trying to like give a book, but then the person that's massaging that person's ego on the material platform, it's like this is their egoism also, because they're just trying to make their life easier just to get along. And so it can be like that. And then, anyways, I remember growing up dealing with different people. It's just, oh my God, this person is just like too much. And sometimes, anyways, you don't see that, but sometimes I see that, whatever, driving different people around. It's like some people get in the car and it's just like too much. It's just like they did this and did that, or they're just like, whatever, just so successful or whatever. And they may not even be successful, but they have just like a sense of like, I am very important. Whatever I'm doing and my, you should like listen to me or whatever it is. And so anyways, egotistical. And then also this is, anyways, it doesn't have the word ego in it, but it's synonymous, but megalomaniac. And that's someone that's just like, they really give so much importance to themselves, whatever it be, that they're just a super important person. Prabhupada would also make that point, that the graveyard is full of like indispensable people. He's quoting somebody that said that, I believe. So like that scene that people, they think I'm so important, I'm doing so much without me, how can whatever go on, like I saw something, anyways, I don't know what happened or whatever, but who really cares? Like, I think some people were trying to get, his name is slipping me. Elon Musk, they're trying to get him out of like Tesla or something, kick him out or something. There was like some news article. And so he may be thinking that like, without me, what is Tesla? Like I am Tesla, like that. But then it's like so many people think, so he'll exist for some time, do some things, and then he'll go away. And then somebody else will come along and do something else. Just like, Ambarish Ford is there, but whatever, Henry Ford was there and he went and Ford is still going on or whatever. And Ford may not go on forever. But different people, they have like this conception. They place so much emphasis on their own material abilities, intelligence, mind, body, whatever it is. But the thing is that these things are temporary and they won't last forever. But that with all these exaggerated senses of self-worth, it just entangles living further into the material concept of life. And so then they act more and more within that sphere and do more and more things. And, then you have the news to report those different things. And so anyways, but people generally, they understand to be heavily egoistical is bad and is not a good thing. And so there's some talk about that to, chill out and to be, whatever. It seemed, to give less importance to oneself, but still, unless one comes on the platform of Krishna consciousness, there will always be a sense of false ego, because you can't, the point, as we were discussing previously, so to become situated in one's pure spiritual endiety, what is that? Muktir hityavatam rupam swarup venat vivastitihi. To become situated in one's own sarup requires one to become liberated, which means to take to the process of Krishna consciousness. To become, as was it Lord Chaitanya told Sanatana Goswami, what is it? Nityasura Krishna Das, that the identity of the living entity is a servant of Krishna. So one may take, whatever, so many different things may happen. People may get humbled, or someone may be, puffed up in material life and then get chopped. But until one comes to the platform of Krishna consciousness, that sense of ahankar will not be purified, and that's the main thing. It has to be purified. So people understand that ego's bad, and everybody has false ego. Anyways, there's so many different things to say about that. There's a famous verse. You can pull this up if you want. Probably would often quote. Everyone probably knows this verse, but prakriti kriyamanani gunai karamani sarvasaha ahankara vidut atma kartaham iti manyate. So this is kind of like one definition of false ego. So Prabhupada, the translation is, so the spirit soul, bewildered by the influence of false ego, thinks himself the doer of activities that are actually carried out by the three modes of material nature. So we can see another angle of understanding that, is that someone that's really under that ego is thinking that whatever he's doing or is happening, that he's the cause. He's the, what is that? What is it? Ishvara Parama Krishna Sachit Ananda Vigraha Aradya Radya Govinda Sarvakarana Karnam. That that person's thinking that he's the cause of all causes. If he's doing something like that. So it's another way of understanding that, and of understanding ego. And it's an interesting purport that Prabhupada gives. I'll read some of it. So Prabhupada explains, so two persons, one in Krishna consciousness and the other in material consciousness, working on the same level, may appear to be working on the same platform, but there is a wide gulf of difference in their respective positions. The person in material consciousness is convinced by false ego that he is a doer of everything. He does not know that the mechanism of the body is produced by material nature, which works under the supervision of the Supreme Lord. The materialistic person has no knowledge that ultimately he is under the control of Krishna. The person in false ego takes all credit for doing everything independently, and that is a symptom of his nescience. So I was reading that, I was thinking that, there's that example given of, first Cassius Clay, when he won that championship in Tokyo, he was like, I'm the greatest, So that's like an exhibition there of false ego, thinking that I am the greatest. But then later he changed that, and then he said that Allah is the greatest. So that shift, same person, but a big gulf of difference. One thinking that, I am the best, I did this by all my ability, but then taking to some form of spiritual life, understanding that actually God is the greatest. Everything comes from him. So the person in false ego takes all credit for doing everything independently, and that is the symptom of his nescience. He does not know that this gross and subtle body is a creation of material nature under the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and as such, his bodily and mental activities should be engaged in the service of Krishna and Krishna consciousness. The ignorant man forgets that that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is known as Hrishikesha, or the master of the senses of the material body. For due to his long misuse of the senses and sense gratification, he's factually bewildered by the false ego, which makes him forget his eternal relationship with Krishna. So Prabhupada makes some nice points there about that. And let's see here. So I guess I'll about wrap it up here and ask for questions. So he explains the false ego there about that. So two people in Krishna consciousness. Then we can also too, and we're speaking these things, but we, of course, as practicing Krishna consciousness, can understand too that we can get swayed by false ego from time to time. And we've heard different things about that within Krishna consciousness, or maybe we've seen different things. Like, what is it? Different things, like, devotees, for instance, saying, and there may be, like, truth to that, but, like, that, like, if, like, a devotee may be serving in a particular project, and then maybe, like, vocalizing or thinking that without me, this whole thing will fall apart, and like that. It may or may not be true. I remember at one temple I was at, there was, like, a devotee that was, like, doing everything, and, a lot of different services. And then that devotee left, and then there was a lot of, like, confusion. How will things go on? That person was doing, like, practically half the stuff of the temple and like that. And then that person left, and then whatever, things still went on. Things are still going on just fine. So like that. And then also, too, of just, maybe, like, it could be so many different ways that can manifest. But, like, in spiritual life, overemphasizing our own self-importance in Krishna consciousness. And we don't see anywhere in Shastra or the teachings of our acharyas or Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu or anywhere where it's recommending that that's a good thing, to think that, like, we're very important in Krishna consciousness, or, what I'm doing is, like, the best thing or whatever. We see that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu teaches Trinada Pusa Nichena, that we should be humble, lower than the blade of grass, like that. And we could see, too, even Srila Prabhupada, as pastime, he came and he did so much to establish Krishna consciousness and practice Krishna consciousness. And he laid out so many different instructions about how to, he wanted his society run and how he wanted things to go on. But still, even, he left this material world and went back to the spiritual world. Well, he didn't really ever leave. But like that, we say they go back home, back to Godhead, or return back to the Nitya Leela. So even Srila Prabhupada was here and did so many different things like that. And he laid the foundation for future creation, or future, propagation of Krishna consciousness, and for individuals to take to the path of pure devotional service. But we see that even then, that Srila Prabhupada, he established all that for others to carry forward. And he wasn't like saying like I'm going to leave and everything is going to be finished and nothing will, like, last. Of course, we understand that when great acharyas leave, things do get difficult, and from time to time, great devotees come and kind of, like, maybe have to resuscitate the parampara, because it can get a little off from time to time. But we see that great devotees, that they may do big service and establish big things, but they expect others to come up to that platform and carry things forward. Whereas in the material spirit, some people may think that I'm doing something so big and no one will be as great as me. Just like the Dalai Lama, for instance. he was quoted as saying at one point that like he doesn't think there should be another Dalai Lama after him because he's become so famous. But what does that have to do with spiritual life? Like to attain a degree of international fame amongst, hogs, dogs, camels, and asses. The point of spiritual life isn't to become famous. So he had a misconception. So, and we don't see Srila Prabhupada said anything like that, I've done so much and I've become, world famous and things like that. So like, I should be like the last Acharya. Prabhupada never said anything like that. So we can see the striking difference between the characteristics of pure devotees and how they act and how they behave. But false ego is definitely something we have to be careful of in Krishna consciousness, like that. And something may happen and we may get annoyed or we may want things in a particular way. And we have to be careful of that because we may be agitated about something and there may be reason to be agitated about it or there may not be reason to be agitated about it. Just like, let's say, I don't care so much now, but like previously, just using myself as an example, I used to not like mint. I didn't like the taste mint. It was just growing up, it was just toothpaste, that's why. So I didn't like mint. And so like if someone were to make mint chutney and then I were to like chastise them like anything afterwards, you made this mint chutney, it tastes like garbage. But then everybody else thinks it was like a good chutney. That could be, I'm identifying with my, taste and like that, and then thinking that because I'm disturbed that was wrong and then such like that. So it has to be, it's a difficult line, and we have to be careful about that in Krishna consciousness, especially with dealing with people. That am I dealing with somebody or instructing somebody, that's what's good for them on Krishna consciousness according to Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, or is it according to my own reference of likes and dislikes and like that or whatever. There's so many different ways that can manifest, but we should be careful of that within Krishna consciousness because there's so many different examples of people placing a little bit too much importance on themselves and getting a little bit carried away with that, or thinking that they're very big or whatever the situation may be, or the best guru, or the best this or best that. So the point is that we may be experiencing Krishna's mercy, but we have to always remember that whatever great things we're doing in Krishna consciousness, just like I was reading yesterday, I'll read that, and then, anyways, there's some other stuff I was going to say, but whatever. But I was reading this the other day, but the devotee always thinks that whatever great thing I'm doing is actually Krishna's mercy. And it's Krishna's empowering or whatever it is. So I'll read this here. So this is from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's actually a nice, what is it? Actually, maybe pull this up. We'll read the whole thing. We'll end there. So this is the Adi Leela, chapter 8, text 39. It's a good mentality to have, and it's nice actually. So I just read the whole thing. So just go to translation. So the subject matter of this book is so sublime that it appears that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has personally spoken through the writings of Sri Vrindavandas Thakur. So Krishnadas Kaviraj is talking about, Chaitanya Bhagavat. So Srila Sanatana Goswami has written in his Hari Bhakti Vilash, Vaishnava Mukod Girnam, Putram Harikatam Ritam, Shravanam Naiva Kartavyam, Sarpo Shishtam Yathapayaha. One should not hear anything about Krishna from a non-Vaishnav. Milk touched by the lips of a servant has poisonous effects. Similarly, talks about Krishna given by a non-Vaishnav are also poisonous. Transcendental literature that strictly follows the Vedic principles and the conclusions of the Puranas in the Pancharatrika Vidi can be written only by a pure devotee. It is not possible for a common man to write books on bhakti, for his writings will not be effective. He may be a very great scholar and may be expert in presenting literature in flowery language, but this is not at all helpful in understanding transcendental literature. Even if transcendental literature is written in faulty language, it is acceptable if it is written by a devotee, whereas so-called transcendental literature written by a mundane scholar, even if it is a very highly polished literary presentation, cannot be accepted. So this is the main point here. So the secret in a devotee's writing is that when he writes about the pastimes of the Lord helps him. He does not write alone. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita, Dadami bhuri yavagam tam yenamam upayanti te. Since a devotee writes in service of the Lord from within gives him so much intelligence that he sits down near the Lord and goes on writing books.
Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami confirms that Vrindavan Das Thakur wrote, what Vrindavan Das Thakur wrote was actually spoken by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he simply repeated it. The same holds true for Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami wrote Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita in his old age in an invalid condition, but it is such a sublime literature that Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur used to say, the time will come when the people of the world will learn Bengali to read Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. We are trying to present Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita in English and do not know how successful it will be. But if one reads this original Chaitanya Charitamrita in Bengali, he will relish increasing ecstasy in devotional service. So much can be said about that, especially that last part. You can take a poll or do an analysis of people. How do you feel after reading that Chaitanya Charitamrita? Do you feel increasing ecstasy? Yeah, they will be. So much can be said about this, specifically this point that Prabhupada is making, that when devotees are, and this is just an example, but when pure devotees are riding, they're riding as Krishna's there with them, sitting down and then speaking to them and explaining like that and helping them to compose these transcendental literatures. And we could say that too, like he's making there with Krishnadas Kaviraj. Prabhupada's making that point. Krishnadas Kaviraj is making that point about Vrindavan Das Thakur. We can similarly say that about Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur or Srila Prabhupada. And then when I was reading that, I was going to send this to you, Chandracharya Prabhu, actually. But anyway, I'll just tell you now. When I was reading that, I was thinking that about Guru Maharaj also. Like that these, it's only due to my lack of vision, don't see that fully. But when these great devotees, when they write these books and they explain that Krishna is dictating and giving them the intelligence and how to organize all these different things and how to, present that for the benefit of the conditioned souls to come to the platform of pure devotional service. So devotees on the topmost platform, they have that pure ego, and so and so like as Prabhupada is explaining here, so they have that realization. And then one last point I'll make here is I know like when His Holiness Bhakti Vikas Maharaj, when we first had the books here, and then so we were like, I think it was at the camp, but it was like an announcement was made that these books were published, and explaining that Bhakti Vikas Maharaj had worked so long on these books for so many years, and just like watching, and like Maharaj didn't really like, it was just, he kind of just like shook his head, and that was really like it. It wasn't like a sense like of anything, like it wasn't like, at least for me, like I didn't really see like so much ego there. I was thinking like if I wrote like a book or something and I spent so many years about it, like you never hear the end of it from me about like how I wrote this book and how I worked so hard and like that. But it was like that, and it was like, okay. And then he gave like this introduction talk, or that promoting this book that I wrote in this book. And of course he did that for the benefit of others. But I was just thinking like, wow, like worked so hard, so many years on this book, so many difficulties gone through that, have no idea, so the struggles to go through that. And then it was just like that book was presented. It was kind of like, yeah, like that. And of course he's ecstatic to hear, because that book for him, it's not about like, he wrote this book and it's his greatness, but he wrote this book as an offering to his spiritual master for the glorification of Srila Prabhupada and to preserve his movement as an offering. So it's just like amazing, actually. It's just like thinking about that like some weeks ago, about how like amazing, like as Prabhupada's making here, like great devotees, like Krishna gives them that intelligence, and then they write that, and then they're able to, to promote that book, distribute that book, and everything with a pure heart, actually. And it's way different when you see all these like mundane scholars in the material world, or literary artists, or whatever, or fiction writers, or Shakespeare, or whoever it is, top, what is that, J.K. Rowling or whatever, wrote Harry Potter. So there's all this egoism goes in there, and then to promote it and a book and things. But these great devotees, none of that is there. It's completely absent. So then what do you get from someone that has no ego and is situated in the pure platform? You get Krishna. So anyways, these different coverings are there in the material world to keep conditioned souls down. But the pure devotees come and they're free from that. And so they give us instructions and they take our hand to pull us out of the material world and to save us from the ocean of birth and death. So we could stop there if there's any questions or comments about anything. Rishi.
I was wondering about this point about how one, yeah, how do you use this? Oh, there you go, I got it. I was wondering about the point there about how one should be a pure devotee in order to write books on Krishna consciousness. So, but then at the same time, there's like instructions and orders to push on the movement and, write that everyone, I don't know about everyone, but yeah, I think also everyone, Srila Prabhupada was saying in the movement should do some writing.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering where's like the authorization to write come from? Because it's not like someone's just going to think, okay, I'm a pure devotee now. I'm going to write something about Krishna.
So there could be different ways of understanding that. So one way can be that one is in the pure devotional line, and so that can authorize him to write, because one has a spiritual master, and then he's coming in the disciplic succession, so he knows the shastric conclusions. That can be one understanding of that. And Srila Prabhupada, when he was here, I mean, he engaged so many of his different disciples in writing that probably, maybe some of them might not have even been following the four regulative principles. Like the early Back to Godhead magazines, Prabhupada would engage so many of his different disciples in doing that. And Prabhupada also, the spiritual master, would check that. And like, for instance, I mean, not just writing is there, but also just in publication in general. Because we see that Srila Prabhupada didn't like the advertisements in the Back to Godhead that like by chanting Hare Krishna, I don't know exactly what all of them were saying. It helps me like get free from stress. By chanting Hare Krishna, it like helps me like work better at my job. So anyways, you can see that that's like there. So Prabhupada wasn't like happy with that. So but the spiritual master is there to kind of like check and make sure things are in the proper Siddhanta. So that's like the main point. Specifically speaking, like as far as like maybe as far as like commenting on intricacies of like Krishna's pastimes and like dealings with his devotees and such, that's kind of like a little bit like of a higher level than just like kind of like some of the philosophy. So specifically with getting in like things like that, one should be like more qualified for like if one is going to start commenting upon like rasa and such, and things like that. And that's not like recommended for like new devotees to like start writing like a commentary on like the whatever the like the song of like separation of the gopis or something like that. So like that. But Prabhupada did encourage his disciples to like write and such, and to present the subject matter, different things according to different angles, according to how society changes, because different things come up, and devotees can speak on that or write about that. So anyways, a couple thoughts there. You have something, Chanacharya Prabhu?
Just saying the interesting point you're making. I mean, this comes up a lot, the aspect of false ego, and how within devotional service we're meant to desire a humble position in which, just a simple student, even a sweeper of the temple, whatever, bathroom cleaner, whatever it may be. Sometimes we may desire like that also, but then sometimes when that position is given upon us, then we become agitated.
Yeah.
Guru Maharaj writes like one I think must be a letter, not a letter, one of the Vyasa Puja offerings in that book, My Memories of Srila Prabhupada. He writes, in his humility, he writes like that, Srila Prabhupada, I pray that it was like, that I go through so many difficulties to become purified, but then when those difficulties come upon me, and then I pray again, please remove those difficulties, and I don't see how it's purifying for me.
Yeah.
He was just saying along those lines. And I can see how sometimes you have that. And we think that we might be humble sometimes. Oh yeah, I can just do some simple thing. But then when we're taken off that position we may have, and then we're doing some simple service, then it's agitating to our mind. And then hopefully we can realize, oh wait, okay, I'm meant to relish this position. Or another point I was also thinking was of how false ego rubs off on us, and how sometimes we may criticize others for being, full of false ego, but then we ourselves also act on that platform unknowingly or knowingly.
Yeah.
Worse is knowingly, that we knowingly know, okay, yeah, this is how I'm not meant to act, but I'm doing that just because, just I feel like it and I don't want to change that. So there's like so many aspects of it with false ego and practical like implications in our lives of how when we have a system that is not proper of devotees acting properly, and that, I don't know if you read that article that I sent you of Sadachar.
Yeah.
It makes the point that if that ideal behavior is not there, and Srila Prabhupada makes that point a lot in this Mood and Mission in that second volume, that if the disciples are not of proper behavior, ideal behavior, then nobody will respect him. And then what happens is within our own society, we take that to be ideal behavior. Yes, I'm doing the big thing and this is what I'm doing, and and then so the younger guys think that's just normal, that's the behavior of pure devotional service. So then they take upon that bhav, and then when that is, and then they take that, and then it's hard to remove that from them because nobody else is willing to do that. And so then it becomes a big problem in which our society just loses the aspect of pure devotional service because of wrong behavior.
Yeah.
So it presents a lot of problems. Therefore, it's required. And Srila Prabhupada writes in that the society of brahmanas is like very important. He emphasizes that all the devotees must come to that level of brahmana in which that is not full of false ego. He's humble, but at the same time he knows how to teach in such a way that attention is not to himself but to the teachings of the acharyas in Krishna. And all the devotees keep saying that about Srila Prabhupada. Anytime it's like Srila Prabhupada never even pointed, he said, no, Krishna, Krishna, Krishna,
Yeah.
Krishna. And then naturally the devotees glorified. That glorifies all over the world. How does that go?
Avyas, Bhavana.
Yeah. Vedigya Charita. No, is that right? Vedigya Charita. That. Yeah, the scriptures sing of his character, and his glories is spread all over the three worlds. So it's natural for the devotee to be glorified, but then he himself should never glorify himself and tell others to glorify himself. It's just such a big. It's amazing how that leads to such a great fall down in our own character, in our own lives. So we're always seeing ourselves as insignificant, but at the same time carrying on the mission with that, with the proper mood, it can be really difficult.
Yeah. Just speaking about ego, let me see, I got like 2 points. Let me try to make them quick. So one big topic, a small thing. It's tricky, so I'll tell the first thing once, then get to the second thing. So I remember being in the temple and just talking about false ego, and one particular devotee, it was anything you did, it was everything was an attack on him. We stayed in a room together, and anyways, I had some service, I was barely in the room, so I'd be in the room for a little bit and read something, and then one day he just snaps and just why aren't you talking to me? What's the matter? You have a problem with me? And he's in my face and just what did it, he's so agitated, and I'm just bro, I don't have a problem with you. I'm just we're just not really in here. And he was livid. And just it was other stuff too. It wasn't just that. It was other things. If the door slammed, he would be screaming and freaking out. It was just anyways. And then some stuff happened later that was one of those one of those stories. One of the typical crazy Western stories. But anyways, that whole situation happened. But it just But another thing too is that it's another sense of egoism. We may think I'm being very puffed up, so let me do something humble. But it may we should do something humble for sure. But if we're doing some valuable service that really only we can do, and then we give up that service, that also may be egoism. Whatever it may be. If I for instance, if I know so much about cars, but then I think oh, I'm so puffed up, I'm not gonna fix the temple cars anymore because I think I'm the best. But then it's who's gonna fix the cars? Guru Maharaj talks about that. We sing kirtan, but then we think oh, I'm the best kirtan singer, or we give class, I give the best classes. And then we're okay, I'm not gonna give class anymore. I'm not gonna sing kirtan. But it's someone needs to speak to new people. Kirtan has to go on. You're gonna give up the Yuga Dharma, because that's like a sense of false ego there in and of itself. So it's like funny how like it can work, you know what I mean? Like it can go like to one extreme to the other. So it's always good. And you made that point that there has to be like brahmanas or some seniors. Like we always need to have like seniors in our life that can kind of like help like keep us on track. Because the tendency is always kind of like to go a little bit this way, a little bit that way, a little bit this way, a little bit that way. And then 20 years go by and it's like, you know, we're like 5,000 yojanas like off point because like 20 years ago, like whatever, we started like eating karmi grains, and then now like whatever, we're going to like Applebee's and getting the vegetarian, you know, whatever feed, you know, we order vegetarian. So it's like things can go off. So that's like you're saying, it's always important to have that guidance. But anyways, thank you. So yeah, Rishi.
What you were saying just made me think of this. I was wondering, what's like the check for false pride? Because I guess it would be assumed that we come to Krishna consciousness and devotee association with that in the beginning anyways, just because of where we're at in the material world. So what's like the check for it? Besides, you were saying one thing you said is from senior devotees can, you know, curb it down.
So generally when someone comes new to Krishna consciousness, I mean, they may have like a lot of ideas and a lot of things. Like they're not like a pure devotee. They're a jewel, but they just need to be cut properly, and so like that. Anyways, that's like the process of whatever. Like jewelers, they know how to like cut the gem so it looks really nice. And anyways, there's a description given in the Bhāgavatam about that, but that's a little high. But there's some description given like how Krishna's a jewel and some of his devotees are like the gold that casts that. So anyways, somebody comes new and it's understood they have like so many, you know, defects, but they want to be Krishna conscious. So it's a matter of just like dealing with that individual and shaping that. So generally when people come new to the temple, they're engaged in like some menial service, or they're put out on book distribution, or they're put under the guidance of somebody that's like senior or whatever, and then they're trained. And then also too, I mean, just because you know, it's not just like some factory like cranking out people. You have like a relationship with somebody. So it's like, you know, you see that person and then you interact with them and then you kind of explain like, okay, hey, like, you know, like for instance, I know like one time when somebody was new at the temple, like when this person would preach, it was like they were new, but they always wanted to like take over and stuff. And it was like, they were like the best preacher and stuff. And like, it would be like maybe two of us talking. And then this person would like always like cut over me and stuff like that. So it was just like, hey, you need to like chill out like a little bit. It's like, you're new, you don't really like understand the philosophy. And then he'd be like cut out. And then he wouldn't understand something and like ask me for like help. So it's like that. So then like we kind of like have that personal touch with people. The problem is though that sometimes that like we're in a humble situation in Krishna consciousness or humble position, but it's almost by force that like we're in a temple and we're new, so we're humble. But like we may not actually, we may not really take in the essence of humility actually. And then what sometimes happens is that we see that people, they're in a position and there's checks and balances, okay? But then as soon as some of those checks and balances are gone, it's like, you know, it's like Bhakti-Vikas Maharaj says, then the little Hitler comes out. Mm-hmm. And it's like all that humility is like out the window. And it's like you have like a tyrant that's like, you know, whatever. Or it could be like lying or this or that. It's like, you know, so many things can like manifest. So it's like we have to get trained up. Then it's on us to actually take like these instructions we're getting to heart actually. Because there will come a time like in Krishna consciousness for like everybody, maybe not everybody, but there's going to come a time where you have to like choose to do the process. Like you make a choice. Like now it's like, okay, you're living in the ashram. It's like you have to go to Mangalarti. But there may come a point in time where you're traveling, whatever, where like you don't have to come to Mangalarti. You don't have to get up. You don't have to chant your 60 rounds. You don't have to do any of that stuff. So you have to like get to a point where you have to choose to follow the process, and then you have to choose to practice sincerely. And if you recognize like weeds or other devotees recognize weeds, you have to put in the work to get them out of your heart. So anyways, a little elaboration. Anything from the Mataji side? We're running short. Okay, nothing? Okay. Anything else? All right, thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki.
Jai.
Srīmad Bhāgavatam ki.
Jai.
Jai.